Each year, September 30th marks the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. The day honors the children who never returned home and survivors of residential schools, as well as their families and communities. Public commemoration of the tragic and painful history and ongoing impacts of residential schools is a vital component of reconciliation process. Both the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation and Orange Shirt Day take place on September 30th. Orange Shirt Day is an Indigenous-led grassroots commemorative day intended to raise awareness of individual family and community intergenerational impacts of residential schools and to promote the concept of every child matters. The orange shirt is a symbol of the stripping away of culture, freedom, and self-esteem experienced by Indigenous children over generations. On September 30th, we encourage all Canadians to wear orange to honor the thousands of survivors of residential schools.
My name is Arlene Dunn. I'm the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs, Minister responsible for immigration, Opportunities New Brunswick, small business and economic development. Pabineau First Nation, I believe, is exceptional in terms of working with the government. They were the first community to actually come forth and say that, look, we need to figure out a way forward in terms of a new economic partnership and a new partnership in general. They've been forthcoming, they've been very focused with respect to wanting to build that partnership with the government, and I think that relationship with the government is extremely important, and there's a huge opportunity here for a wonderful partnership moving forward, and that's what I'm looking forward to.
You know, we have a long way to go, I think, many of us, in terms of recognition and acknowledgement of reconciliation and the wrongs that have been perpetrated against First Nations people. And I think this is one very concrete way that we can start to show that recognition and acknowledgement. And personally, for me, I'm going to be pleased and honored to be a part of the events that are taking place on the 30th on Pabineau First Nation, and I believe many of our council will be there. So it's an opportunity for us to show again the recognition and acknowledgement, and to start the conversation and the overture that is really sorely needed.
Sagamo, Winjibijuig, Terry Richardson. Thank you very much. I'm Chief Terry Richardson from Pabineau First Nation. When I come outside and I see the Mi'kmaq flag flying with the Canadian flag and the New Brunswick flag, you know, that is a sign of reconciliation. It's the small little things that make a big difference sometimes. And that's a step in not acknowledging where First Nations are. You know, and one of the things, as the mayor stated, you know, unceded, unsurrendered, it's a land that we've shared for hundreds and hundreds of years, and we continue to share. And you know, it's for the benefit of all First Nations, not only First Nations that we work, but the benefit of all New Brunswickers. Because it's so important that we work together, and that's what we've been attempting to do in our regional development here in northern New Brunswick. Now, a lot of people say, well, what's your ties with, you know, why are you so interested about the northern part of New Brunswick? Well, I was born and bred in Dalhousie, New Brunswick. My parents are from Nash Creek. My mom is from Nash Creek. Have a whole bunch of community members who actually still live in Gravel Hill. So my ties are here to the north. Our ties, as family ties, are here to the north. And it's very important. We want to see the north prosper because we've taken a lot of bad hits. Let's be realistic. The mines, the mills, everything closing. So how do we get beyond that and start to redevelop the region? Because if the region redevelops, it's not only good for Belledoon, Bathurst, Beresford, Nigadoo, Dalhousie, Camelton, it's better for First Nations too. Because if people are up here working, we're all spending our money in the region. We're all benefiting. And that's what we've been really pushing.
And you know, all of us here, you folks, us as leaders, we really have to project excitement. We're dealers in hope for the community, moving forward, and with excitement and enthusiasm. And that's what we try to bring into the community. That's our obligation as leaders.
And working together. You know, we're a very small community, much like municipalities. I mean, we're only 3 councillors and a chief in our community. But, you know, we have our disagreements. I'm not going to lie to you. We do. But you know what? At the end of the day, our vision is for the community and moving it forward. And what can we do to work together? You know, and we look at the municipalities as well. That's why it's a pleasure to have a chance to talk to you guys, because this is what it's about. It's about giving you what we're doing in our vision and how can we work together. And it's not saying what you guys, we're not stopping you guys from doing your own thing, by no means. I mean, you have your own agenda, you have your own municipal stuff you can move forward. But there's things we can work on together that we could really develop this region. And that's why it's always been an honor to talk to Paul and to talk to you guys, because Paul talks highly of his council. And it's a chance for us to work together to make these things happen. And we can do that. So, you know, the emotion behind the rhetoric, you'll get some First Nations that are very upset. The provincial government right now is not only First Nations, they think the province, and no offense to the provincial government, but they think it stops at the Miramichi Bridge and nobody lives up north. So, you know, that's the unfortunate part we have to deal with as governments. But how do we get beyond that? You know, we still have to be there and say our words and get our word out there to let them know we exist, right? And that we can move forward. And that's what we try to do. And we're not going to fight with everybody. I mean, we could say, listen, it's our land, unceded, unsurrendered territory. We're just going to move forward. But no, you know, we want to move forward together. That's the key.
Yeah, and moving forward too, as the chief says, you know, we're talking about a force here. We're talking about the communities point from Beldoon down through to Bathurst, and even I was down in Shippingen today. You know, we're all together, we're all looking at the same thing. We want to move forward as a community, and we can do it together in a lot better way. So partnership's the key to success as we move forward. That doesn't mean, as the chief alluded to, you know, there are issues out there, inherent rights and all that sort of stuff that stands there, that we don't usurp, we don't put it aside, but we say, let's move forward on what's doable within the constitution of the land, agree to disagree, and then some of this stuff, when we come back to it, may not be as important anymore. It may not be as important as we move collectively. And I just, as an elder, I gotta say something about, you know, the state of where we are as a world today, and the necessity to come together. You know, you look at the political turmoil in the world, the war is going on. The birds are talking, the animals are talking, the sun is talking, Mother Earth upon whom we walk is talking. We're in need of change. We're seeing Mother Earth reacting in a very negative way sometimes. She's angry, earthquakes, flooding, hurricanes, you name it. So we have to come together and work as one, all colors, all races. So we are not talking about being myopic here. We're talking, as the chief talks about, working together to solve the problems, create hope for the region, not just for our own communities. As the chief says, you have individual desires and individual hopes. And by the way, this community is going to be booming when we get that Port of Beldoon going, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. You will be the community to look forward to as we move down the road. I'll let the chief go on to this.
And you know, when we talk about the truth and reconciliation, and we talk about the United Nations rights, to Indigenous rights, I mean, that's all been set in court. We have court. I don't want to go into litigation. A little bit about our background. I've done 25 years in the military. I got out of the military because the chief at the time in the community said, come back and work for me. I said, what's your vision? What's your, you know, I said, what's your plan? He gave me his 10-year plan at that time. I said, well, yeah, I can buy into that. Now, 13 years later, I'm still there. So, I mean, you know, it's now moving the community forward. I don't want to fight. I've done that in the military. I know it's not fun. You know, so I would rather sit down, negotiate, try to figure out how we can work together, and then keep moving on that aspect. And I do that with the provincial and federal government all the time. I tell them, we have a vision, and we want to move it forward, but we've got to work together. If we don't work together, we're not going to get anywhere. And you know, it's bringing those people and working together. And we have, trust me, you know, there's 4 personalities we have in our chief and council. And we're strong personalities. But at the end of the day, we sit down and we hash it out and we say, okay, what's best for the community? What's best for the region? Let's keep moving along those lines. So you know, my brother always says this, and I like using this line: if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up somewhere else. You've got to set that vision for where you're going to be. What do you see as your vision for the village of Beldoon? What do we see as our vision for our community of Pabineau? We have a vision. We want to be there. We could have sat down and said, when the mine closed and we seen all the mills closed, we could have sat back and said, like, it seems, you know, and I hate to use this, but it's the reality. It seems in the North we have this defeatist attitude, that we have a tendency to sit back and say, oh, it's happening to us again, and we go, what are we going to do about it? Now, we said, let's go out there and let's get opportunity. Let's go out there and let's start bringing opportunity to the North. And if we can't rely on government to do it for us, because the provincial and the federal government aren't going to do it for you, you got to go knock on proponents' doors and say, hey, come on up north. You know why? Because we got a great work ethic. We're great people. We have great communities, and we're going to accept you up here. And that's what we've tried to do, is bring a lot of those proponents here. And we'll talk a little bit more on some of the stuff that's exciting stuff that's coming, I believe, for the village of Beldoon and for the region in general.
And the other important thing, you know, as leaders, you have to remember that we're part of a bigger community. And if you have a vision, you have to have people buy into that vision. You have to have people in the community agree to your strategic plan and where you're going. Otherwise, they're not going to have buy-in. So what we've done is we've got the elders, we've got the youth, we've got community members, chief and council involved, all of our managers involved in developing a strategic plan in how we go forward. And the strategic planning process, I won't get into it, it's like an MBA class here, but basically it's talking about the universe and looking at things that you know are going to happen, for sure, but you also have to plan on the things that aren't going to happen. For example, Caribou Mine shut down. We didn't plan on that. Perhaps we planned a little bit on Putin and invading Ukraine, and we positioned ourselves before that with respect to moving on clean energy in the Port of Beldoon. So that was a strategy moving forward and bringing proponents in. So the point there is that you've got to develop a strategic plan that's inclusive, bringing everybody in. And you've got to have sign-in to them, because as leaders, we're not effective if we just dictate and say, here's how it's my way or the highway, which is I guess a line I use in a recent letter to the Premier. You know, basically say, Premier, look, if you want us to negotiate along the range of negotiation here, make sure that it's goodwill and allow us to come into that range of negotiation to agree to disagree. If you say, my way or the highway, we're not even going to want to negotiate. And so there's no movement towards agreeing to disagree and moving forward as a result. So the bottom line is strategic planning. And where do we want to be in the end? We know that, you know, we're going to be a self-autonomous community. We want to move forward. We want to be able to have government-to-government type of relationships. We want to have full employment in the community. We want to have people to come back into the community. We want to have health and good style of life, living in the community, houses for everybody. So that's the end state of where we want to go. That's our pot of gold, if you like.
And you know, when you talk about key success factors in strategic planning, obviously, you know, for us, culturally strong, we've gone back to our culture, you know, and understanding who we are as First Nations people, what our culture was strong with our elders. Our elders are very important to us in our First Nation community, just as our youth. You know, we've sort of lost that in some of our municipalities. You know, we should be bringing, you know, because we have a tendency to forget about them sometimes. And that's being strong as municipality as well, because you're getting everybody to understand what Beldoon is, who Beldoon. You have a great strong history here. We all do up north. That's why I love talking about up north, because that's what, you know, we're great people here. And that's why we don't sell ourselves enough sometimes along those lines. You know, a vision statement. I'm sure you guys have a vision statement for the village of Beldoon. We have a vision statement as well. A strategic plan we've put into place. We've, you know, a consultation protocol when we're dealing with government, when we're dealing with municipalities. A lot of people, because it's unceded, unsurrendered territory. So a lot of people say, well, why do I have to engage First Nations? It's a consultation process, right? It's because it's unceded, unsurrendered territory, lands. So it's better to negotiate, talk about it, and you're going to come up with a plan that's good for everybody. Trust me. We're not adverse to development by any means. I want to see development, because development means more people making money, more people coming to eat at our restaurant, more people coming to buy gas at our store, more people shopping at our stores. These are things you want, right? And just like the municipality, you're going to develop and grow and get that economy strong for the area of Beldoon especially.
And a consultation protocol is important to mention too, that there's accountability. In other words, as leaders, you go out, you negotiate with proponents, you negotiate with government, but it's within a parameter that the community says as a whole, this is as far as you can go without coming back to us to approve it. So, it's an inclusive kind of approach towards consultation. We don't want to be able to make decisions blindly and then leave future generations pay the repercussions associated with that. So it's an inclusive kind of process.
And a communication strategy is so important as well, just like it is for you guys, to get your word out there, right? Here's what we're doing for Beldoon. As council members, you're all elected. You're responsible for your constituents out there, just like we are responsible for our constituents within our First Nation community. So it's important that they know what's going on and you have that communication line so that they're able to buy into what you're doing, right? Especially when you're making big decisions. You know, when we talked about the declaration of title and rights over traditional territory, again, we don't get caught up in that. I don't like getting into this. I'm not going to fight with anybody. I'd rather sit down and negotiate, and that's the approach we've taken. And a lot of First Nation, some other First Nation communities aren't as open to that. Some will, go along the other road. I think that's not the progressive way. I think if you want to be progressive and you want to move forward, you've got to sit down and negotiate where you can. And it makes things a lot easier.
And on that note, for example, you've heard about the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, the free and prior consent associated with that. People are afraid of the free and prior consent. They say, well, free and prior consent basically means you can say no. To some extent, that's correct. But really what we say is, look, we have 4 pillars: economic, environment, social, and culture. We want balance between all of those. For example, if you bring somebody in here just chasing money and they're ruining the environment, that's not balance. So what we're saying is create that balance and then we can move forward. So don't be afraid of this free and prior consent. Just work with us and agree. No one is going to disagree that, there should be imbalance. There should be balance. I'll give you an example. For example, the pipelines up north in northern BC. Well, some communities have gone in and they got money as a result of that, but what's happened? Alcohol is flowing into the communities, they've got rape, they've got all kinds of things going on associated with that. That's ruining the culture and it's a social kind of problem. So there's no balance there associated with that. So in moving forward, I suggest, in our case, when we deal with proponents, look for that balance. That makes sense.
And one thing we've really looked at within our community is separating business from politics. Unlike a municipality, you're not really involved in politics, or in business. We have to be involved in business because business growth and economic growth is going to give us that independency we need as First Nations. So we have to, how do you separate that? So what we've done is we've created an an ECDEV corporation that is going to make all the business decisions. So therefore, they make the decisions and it's separate from business. Our business is separate from politics. And that way we don't get involved in it. Because that's very important, because if you got that menage, your businesses end up failing. Because what you'll do is you'll rob from your businesses every time you're short within your municipality, your municipal funding, and it doesn't work. Whereas if you keep business separate, your businesses, you go to your business, you say, listen, we want to build 3 houses this year. Is it doable? Well, we haven't got enough money within our funding, so no, you can build 1 house instead. So it's managing that and making that understanding. Then the next year you might have a windfall and you build 7 houses. So there's a way of doing that, and it's so important to keep it separate. Otherwise, your businesses fail.
And obviously, the Economic Development Corporation is owned by the community, so the community does have marching orders. In other words, saying, look, if we want development, we want balance in those 4 pillars. And that's the marching order. And the board of directors is made up of people that are separate, and some of them are outside of the community. And this is something that the interest of you too. One of the things that we've done is we've capitalized on what I call intellectual capital. Mr. Mayor, you've got somebody here that's a member of the board of directors of Ontario, of ND Power. I was going to say Ontario, ND Power. Charles Furlock. That's intellectual capital. They can open doors. And so we've got lawyers, we've got business people, we've got foresters, we've got a whole bunch of people. We can just knock on their door and say, even though they're not in the community, we're not afraid to open the door and say, look, can you help us here? Is there a lead? Is there a way you can open a door here? Do you have ideas? That's one thing of building the intellectual capital that's out there and using it. It's not just people that are living in the community as well. The people that are from the community that can refer to from time to time.
The ideal partner you want in business obviously is not focused on selfish gains. That's number one. You don't want somebody who's there just for one reason, and that's to make money, because that's not the right partner to have. They've got to have an understanding what my brother talked about, the four pillars. If they're maintaining and they understand that balance, they're going to be a great partner. And that's what we've looked at for any development that we're putting our name to make sure that they have that balance. Open communication with, I find it, and no offense to Mr. Caron here, one of the things I find is that he doesn't inform the council, the mayors, the stakeholders as First Nations, and you guys are stakeholders as well, more about what's going on. I think that's so important, right? To have that, well, listen, where are we? Because that way you get those false, you get all that false information that gets out there, and that just creates havoc. So it's important to keep that, that open line of communication with everybody, and everybody knows what's going on. And that's one thing we ask our proponents to let us know what's going on, so when somebody comes to us, I can tell them exactly what's going on. Because there's nothing worse than being in government and not being able to tell the person what's going on when you have somebody, one of your constituents coming up to you saying, listen, what's going on? I don't know. Well, didn't I elect you? So it's important that you know what's going on. So that's something that could be done.
My name is Susan Motti. I'm Deputy Chief of Pabineau First Nation. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about truth and reconciliation and what that means for Pabineau First Nation. For myself, I didn't grow up in Pabineau. I grew up in Montreal, was raised by my mom and my father. We'd come to visit regularly, and I can remember sometimes not knowing where my cousins were and realizing, and it's like nobody would tell you where they are either. And the reason was this, that they were put into foster care. Unfortunately, those deep-rooted injuries happen, and which is the effects that we're still trying to deal with today. And for myself, truth and reconciliation means having an open heart to be able to move forward in a direction that heals our members and helps our families stay united to one another and remain strong as a First Nation. This affects so many areas of Pabineau. It affects housing, it affects families, it affects interaction between one another. There's elements that people have a hard time to communicate their feelings or deal with problems. Sometimes that turns into alcohol or drug-related problems. So myself, as an elected person for Pabineau, I have a duty to be looking after my members. And I hope that one day this will just be something that we're going to talk about and how we got through on the other side. I feel that we are strong and we are capable, and we can do this. I know we can. We can come out on the other side so much further ahead, but we need to do it together. And doing that together not just means Pabineau, but it means our surrounding communities, the surrounding areas, and with government as well. So I hope that we can see a bright, strong future for Pabineau. And I have no doubt that we can do that.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Fraser. I'm elected council here in Pabineau First Nation, and I'm a health liaison with our community health center. And I'm here to speak on the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Each year, September 30th, we will celebrate in our community. We have an event. We gather together with mayors of other communities, and we talk about the reconciliation of our peoples and how it affected, and it kind of brings us all together. And in our health center across, we have mental health services set up. When people need the help to talk to someone, we have the services there. So we just like to make this day a special day, celebrate in our community with the people here, and see what we can do to help our community.
Obviously, we lack capacity. Hey, we're a small community, 350 people. You know, we don't have somebody to do everything. We can't be involved in every business. So what we've done is we've partnered with businesses. We've partnered with construction companies. We've partnered with engineering firms. We've partnered with consulting firms. And we're saying, we're going to work together, and our part of it will be, we're going to gain some capacity if and when possible. And at the same time, we'll be able to actually get some extra income coming into the First Nation community. And we determine that with each company that we actually support, and we've bid on certain contracts. And we've actually won quite a few contracts lately, so it's been pretty good.
Let's go through some of the MOUs that we signed, for example. We signed an MOU with the City of Bathurst, a protocol agreement with Mr. Mayor, Council, perhaps we can work that along with you folks as well. The Port of Beldoon, Opportunities New Brunswick happened to be the marketing arm for the government as it relates to attracting business, promoting business. Euron Energy, which was involved in the port here in terms of carbon capture, they were another one. Moltex, ARC, the two small modular reactors companies that we're hoping to bring here. Obviously, Point LaPro is where they're going to develop those small modular reactors, but we see the port here as an avenue where we can ship them abroad on the export market. You know, sell, even if you get 5% of the market of small modular reactors, even 1%, that's still a lot. Assemble them here in Beldoon and then ship them out. And so those are the reasons why we signed, brought Moltex and ARC, the two companies that are involved in small modular reactors, into an MOU.
And you know what, something about that technology that I think people aren't aware of is they sort of offset each other. I don't know if everybody knows, but when you talk nuclear, obviously everybody says, oh my God, you know, nuclear. But you know what? This is clean energy, number one. Number two, the energy that these two type of companies offset each other. Moltex actually uses the recycled fuel rods. So right now, to store any type of nuclear waste, you have to store it for thousands of years. With this new technology that Moltex is developing, they will reduce it to hundreds of years. So that's, you know, because right now what happens is about 80% of a nuclear rod is used, 20% is left. Well, they're looking at this technology of using that other 20% down to even a less of a percentage where they'll be able to store it. Of course, you know, I don't want to store it in northern New Brunswick, and I don't think anybody here would want nuclear waste stored in northern New Brunswick, but they are looking at the Canada Shield as a place to store it, and that's a Canadian-wide actually a study that's in the works to determine where they're going to store it. So another one that we signed, and my brother didn't really mention, we just signed was with ABO Wind.
Into that.
Oh, okay. Well, I won't get into it yet then.
One of the things that we did too, with Mi'kmaq Logistics Limited Partnership, we formed a company under the Economic Development Corporation for a couple of reasons. Number one, the federal government says of all the federal procurement out there, 5% should go to First Nations, Aboriginal peoples, companies, okay, to promote economic development in the region. It's almost like the regional development in the past, you know, where Atlantic Canada had to get a certain percentage and wherever. So we tapped into that and formed a company that says, okay, fine. With that, we partnered with a whole whack of companies. For example, here with the dismantling and the soil remediation associated with the smelter, we've partnered with Sanixon and the other company.
Secure Energy. Secure Energy.
And so we're positioning and saying, okay, Glencore is going to have an Aboriginal inclusion contract, and we're partners with them, so we'll have an opportunity to bid competitively on that, and there's an Aboriginal inclusion clause. Falcon Construction, they're going to be building the mall, or not the mall, but the gas bar and convenience store for us at the Vanier development. They build houses in our community, and that's one thing that the chief hasn't talked about, what's happening in the community. We've got 7 houses, new houses going up this year, and 2 fourplexes. So that's 15 people that are going to have houses this year alone. And we're looking at a salmon interpretation center and a hatchery down the road next year. So, and a new daycare center. So, that's just happening in this year. So with, your desire to move forward and have a plan, know where you're going, things can happen. And it's not easy, we burn the midnight oil, and we do work hard and bring things forward. R.H. Frenette, we signed an agreement with him in terms of working collaboratively on contract. Power Precision, J.J. Branch, and Brunswick Industrial Supplies. This is an interesting one out of Moncton. Maybe you can talk about that.
Yeah, we did a partnership with a safety equipment company, and they don't operate in northern New Brunswick. But they are also looking at the federal procurement side, so they want to build a warehouse with us on our Vanier Boulevard. And we're going to go half and half with them, and it'll actually be a legitimate half and half project. So we're pretty excited about that. That's coming up. But you know, keeping people in the north employed is big for us too. When we talk about these contracts we're talking about, I want to see people from the region being employed, not people from outside the region. That doesn't help us, but people who are within the region. And I think that's why we've got to look at what capacity do we have in the region as we move forward on a lot of these projects. You know, what do we need and how do we get our youth back here? Because let's be realistic. Look at our communities. You know, I mean, I look at Dalhousie. I mean, I know I live there. What, the average age is 56, 57, even higher? You know, all our communities are getting older. How do we keep our young people back here? And that's what we've got to look at. And that's why I'm excited about some of this new stuff that's coming up. So, you know, but I'll leave my brother talk about Vanier because this is his baby.
Well, it's our baby. It's our baby. And, you know, the mall that's going to be happening, I show pictures there. You see these pictures? We're going to have basically the first phase. We're looking at a convenience store, gas bar, and a fast food restaurant. The gas bar is going to be an urban gas bar. Just off to the right, we're going to have a strip mall, 25,000 square feet. And then we're going to have, in phase 2, an entertainment center. And again, that may happen sooner rather than later, but we're working on it. And again, now you see a rough drawing of it, now you don't, but it's going to be nice, I can tell you that.
Roger Clinch, former mayor and member of parliament. Truth and reconciliation for me is an ongoing process. It's about building relationships and working cooperatively to build these relationships further. It's about establishing a framework, a respectful framework for working together. And it's a longer term process whereby non-Indigenous people can reflect on the past bias and work cooperatively to build new relationships. And I think one of the things we can do is reflect on the past, look at the history of the First Nations in this region, and build on that so that we can work together cooperatively in the future. It's important for us as non-Indigenous people to work with the First Nations. The First Nations today are developing projects economically for the economic development of our region, and I think it's important for us to work with the First Nations. I've had the great opportunity and good fortune to get to know Chief Terry Richardson and Band Councillor James Richardson, and they are genuinely interested in economic development in the Chaleur region. It's incumbent upon us to work with them to ensure the success of these operations. The 6 greatest letters in the alphabet are LISTEN. Truth and reconciliation. Listen and act.
That's why we get excited about this, because I believe this is the future for Beldoon. This is the future for northern New Brunswick. When we look at energy, now what do we do how do we prepare ourselves? This is what we've got to strategize. As communities, we got to say, if we've got all of a sudden, we're employing, in hydrogen as an example, 250 people in the region. 250 people, do we have the housing for 250 people in the region? Can we bring 250 new people into the communities? You know, now we have to look at the communities. I'm not only saying Beldoon, but I'm saying from Camelton to Bathurst. So we got to prepare for some of this stuff and say, and that's why I'm saying it's important. It's not going to be Pabineau First Nation saying, I'm going to build apartments for 250 people, because it's not going to happen. It's going to be all of us communities saying, okay, what can we do and how can we do it? And how quick can we do it? And what capacity do we have, right? Because we've got to employ all those people. They're going to be looking for jobs. They're coming here. Not only that, how do we ensure our youth are ready for those jobs? How can we keep our young people here? I've asked, what do I need? What does a young person need to be a hydrogen operator at a hydrogen plant? Or as I even said, a nuclear technician. What do you have to be an engineer? No, you don't have to be an engineer. Okay, what do you need? Do you need pipe fitting? Because we've got to prepare our community colleges now so that we can say, okay, yeah, we've got jobs for these people. What's the carrot going to be? They got a job waiting as soon as the plant's done. So now the plant's being built, our people are being trained, they're going to live in the community, and they're going to stay here. And our communities are going to grow and prosper in the north. That's what the success is. And that's what we've got to do. We've got to prepare, and we've got to be action-oriented, right? Not wait for all this to happen, but we want to see it happen almost together. As we start seeing that plant build, okay, now we've got it. We're in. We're working together. And that's why I think, when you look at wind, wind is a little different, but even wind, to operate a hydrogen plant, this is just a quick hydrogen 101, to get actually hydrogen production, you need 1 gigawatt of wind power. I don't know if anybody knows where the Caribou windmills are. Take that, multiply it by 10.
And there's 33 right there now. So that's 330 windmills, basically.
So think about that right across. And one thing we have a lot of in New Brunswick is, believe it or not, wind, but solar as well.
Coming from us on occasion.
Yeah, but we also have solar as well. So, I mean, those are 2 areas we can, it's the thing about green energy, it takes green energy to create green energy. So that's the only way they'll buy it. So you have to have green energy producing green energy. And then it's a buy-in from the German government, right? We also talked about green steel. SMS plant is here in Beldoon. That's going to be a great opportunity. That's like 200 and some jobs. But I mean, again, we've got to be prepared for all that, right? And you know, it's easy for us to sit down and talk to a proponent, because I don't say no to a proponent. I say, oh yeah, no problem, we'll handle that. Well, it's not really me that's going to handle it, but I don't want to turn them away, right? You want them to come here. You want them to buy in. And that's where we're going to be bringing those proponents, especially here to Beldoon, because you guys are going to be where it is, right? But we also have that regional approach. You can draw 1 hour. People will travel an hour to go to work. People in Toronto do it all the time. You know, if I'm living in Dalhousie and I have a house in Dalhousie, I'll travel down to Beldoon to work. If I'm in Bathurst, I'll travel to Beldoon to work. So, I mean, it's going to be beneficial, right? And it's going to raise your tax base too, which is good, right? With the businesses coming in. That's the key.
Better for you if you travel from Beldoon to here, right? But, you know, on just to put the playing field in perspective, the companies that we've been discussing and working with, NextEra obviously is one. You heard about Cross Rivers. Cross Rivers is sort of a venture capital fund that brings in, that funds some of these big projects. ADO Wind, we signed an MOU with them. DP Energy, it's an Irish company. They want to set up windmills out there in the old Brunswick mine site. Euro Manganese, I don't know if the fellow met with you, Mr. Mayor, or not. Marco, and they're clearly interested. They have an operation in Czechoslovakia. They're looking at moving here to service the North American market. Fortescue Futures, Fortescue is a big company as well. We signed an MOU with them initially, and then they moved away from exclusivity, and now we're working with them again at ADO. And so we're getting continuous knocks on the door all of the time with respect to people that want to, you know, the region is on the map. The region is on the map, which is what we want it to be.
And you know, we're all going to play a role. Every municipality is going to play a role. You're going to play a bigger role because a lot of this development is coming to Beldoon. So we've got to be prepared for that, right? And that's why we talk to Paul. We try to update him as much as we get the updates. You guys as council, you know, getting your updates. It's important that we're all on that same wavelength, right? Working together. I mean, we can all sit here and disagree about stuff, right? And sometimes if there's nothing to know, well, then there's nothing to know. I mean, at the end of the day, there might be no information, right? And that's the problem sometimes, is there's that lack of information. So you have a tendency to feel that, oh, everything's slowing down. You know, there's nothing moving on a file. I know we get frustrated often because we say, well, geez, we haven't heard from them. Realizing, of course, again, government is process driven. You can't, you know, they're not like business action oriented. But we don't want to be bogged down and have these people go someplace else. That's the last thing we want to see. And that's where we're sort of competing right now. We're competing with Nova Scotia. We're competing with Newfoundland. And I tell this to the Premier all the time. I tell this to all the ministers. Don't sit back. You know, just because it's happening up north, don't take a negative attitude. You know, give us a chance to develop up north too. Start moving some of these files for us. And that's that hard thing to push sometimes, because it's that north-south mentality. You know, liberal conservative governments, they get caught up in that government aspect. And it's just the reality of the way things work. But at the end of the day, we have to work together. As municipalities, as First Nations communities. If we don't push the agenda, nobody else is going to push it. We can't wait for government. Because if we wait for government, it may not be done. We vote government in, and yet they don't work for us. So I mean, if they're not going to work for us, then we got to work for ourselves. We've got to get out there and push it and say, hey, listen, hold them to task. I hold the MLAs to task all the time. I talk to Renee in Bathurst. I say, what are you doing? Get on. How come you're not pushing? I'm pushing. They won't do anything. Well, push harder. You know, get out there and push. You know, we want to be heard, because if we're not heard, we're not going to get anywhere. You know, and when, you know, for us, my brother said it earlier, partnership is the key to success. We all have to work together if we're going to make the North prosper. Because if we don't, we're all going to be in villages. We're going to go from villages to town, well, from towns, from cities to towns, towns to villages, villages to what, I don't know what's below a village. A township, maybe? I don't know what you would call it. But I mean, our populations are decreasing. We've got to get our youth back here. And I believe this green energy hub is the key to success for this region. And that's why we're pushing it very strongly. The mayor's pushing it, with the support of the council, with all the municipalities. We talk to every municipality, we say, listen, all you have to do is mention it. You know, it doesn't prevent you from working on your whatever projects you got, your splash pads, some people, transition houses, whatever you're doing, keep doing what you're doing. But there's bigger files. We got to look at those bigger files and say, how can we all work together to push them? Because those are what are going to make all our municipalities successful. And I believe that's the future and the key to this region.
I think it's important when we think of the term reconciliation for us to recognize what has occurred in the past in terms of the atrocities that have been done to First Nations people. I think that's a starting point, and obviously it's a very sorrowful and very grieving point, but I also believe it's important for us to focus on the future, to not look beyond the things in the past, but also at the same time to make sure that we're looking at the future in terms of building a better way. And for us to do that, every single one of us has a responsibility. In terms of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action, the government of New Brunswick takes those very seriously. There's been a significant amount of work done, and I won't go into all of the work, but one of the things that I'm most proud of is the fact that there is a partnership with First Nations in the province of New Brunswick with respect to ensuring that residential schools curriculum is within the New Brunswick provincial government school systems, and that's extremely important. We need to educate everyone with respect to what has happened in the past so we never repeat this in the future. I see a tremendous relationship moving forward with First Nations people, and that is my ultimate hope. This position that I have currently ultimately could last for the next couple of years, but I want part of my legacy personally, because it matters to me, that we actually forge a better relationship with First Nations, and that our province understands how important that relationship is for First Nations as well as every other citizen in the province of New Brunswick. It's imperative that all of us understand that, and it's imperative that all of us work together to make sure that that happens.